Before the Nazis found her, she buried hundreds of names. Not gold, not weapons, not secret military plans, just names. Tiny pieces of paper, carefully folded and sealed inside ordinary glass jars. Then she carried them into a quiet garden, knelt beneath an old apple tree, and buried them in the earth. Because if the Germans ever found those names, thousands of children would die. For years, the jars remained hidden underground. Rain fell. Seasons changed. Wars were fought. Empires collapsed. But beneath that tree, hope waited in silence. The woman who buried them never knew if she would live long enough to dig them up again. Yet she believed someone had to remember, because if nobody remembered their real names, it would be as if those children had never existed at all. This is the true story of Irena Sendler, the woman who risked everything to save children she had never even met, to understand why those jars mattered. We have to return to one of the darkest places in human history. Warsaw, October 1940. After invading Poland, Nazi Germany created what became the largest Jewish ghetto in occupied Europe. More than 400,000 Jewish men, women, and children were forced behind walls topped with barbed wire. The area covered only a few square kilometers. Families who once lived in comfortable apartments suddenly shared tiny rooms with strangers. Food became scarce almost immediately. Official rations were so small that many people slowly starved to death. Disease spread through overcrowded streets. Children wandered alone looking for scraps of bread. Every morning, bodies appeared on sidewalks before the city had even fully awakened. Outside the walls, life continued. Inside, an entire community was being erased. Among the people allowed to enter the ghetto was a young Polish social worker named Irena Sendler. Officially, she inspected sanitation conditions to prevent outbreaks of infectious disease. The Germans feared typhus. That fear gave health workers limited access. For Irena, it became an opportunity. Every visit changed her. She watched mothers trying to comfort hungry children with empty bowls. She saw babies too weak to cry. She met fathers who already knew they would never survive the war. The deeper she walked into the ghetto, the more impossible one question became to ignore. If she walked back out through the gate, leaving those children behind, how could she ever live with herself? Most people would have looked at the walls and seen a prison. Irena looked at them and began searching for a way through. At first, she carried food, medicine, blankets, false documents, anything that might keep families alive for one more week. But every visit brought worse news. The Germans weren't simply imprisoning Jewish families anymore. They were preparing to remove them. Entire neighborhoods disappeared overnight. People whispered about trains leaving for mysterious destinations in the east. Almost nobody returned. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some believed the passengers were being relocated for work. Others feared something far worse. Irena didn't yet know the full truth about the extermination camps. But she understood one thing with terrifying clarity. If the children stayed, most of them would never leave alive. Saving food was no longer enough. Saving lives meant getting children out. The problem was, how do you smuggle a child through one of the most heavily guarded places in occupied Europe? Every gate was watched, every movement was questioned, every mistake meant execution. Not only for the rescuer, but for anyone helping them. Even the families hiding those children could be killed. The mission sounded impossible, which is exactly why the Germans believed no one would ever attempt it. They were wrong, because somewhere inside that ghetto, one mother was about to make the hardest decision any parent could ever face. And Irena Sendler was about to ask a question no mother should ever have to answer. Imagine someone knocking on your door and saying they could save your child, but only if you never saw them again. That was the impossible choice facing thousands of Jewish parents inside the Warsaw Ghetto. Every day, the walls closed in tighter. Food disappeared. Disease spread. Then came the deportations. Entire families were ordered onto crowded trains. The Germans claimed they were being relocated for work. But whispers told a different story. People vanished. No letters came back. No families returned. Parents began to realize the horrifying truth. If their children stayed, they would almost certainly die. When Irena Sendler entered the ghetto, she carried more than medicine. She carried hope. Quietly, she approached desperate families with an unimaginable proposal. "Let me take your child." Many parents refused. How could they hand their son or daughter to a stranger? How could they trust someone they had met only moments before? Some believed they would survive the war together. Others simply couldn't bear the thought of saying goodbye. But time was running out. Every week, more trains arrived. Every week, more names disappeared. Eventually, mothers began making the hardest decision of their lives, not because they trusted the future, but because they no longer trusted tomorrow. Some kissed their children one last time. Some whispered prayers. Some handed over a favorite toy. Others couldn't even speak. One witness later remembered mothers standing silently, watching their children disappear around a corner, knowing it might be forever. No battlefield could have demanded greater courage. Getting the children out was another impossible challenge. The Germans searched the gates. Papers were checked. Vehicles were inspected. One mistake meant death. So Irena and her underground network created dozens of different escape methods. Babies were hidden beneath blankets inside ambulances. Doctors claimed they carried patients infected with dangerous diseases. German guards often stepped back rather than risk infection. Some toddlers were placed inside wooden toolboxes, others inside burlap sacks or supply crates. Older children walked through hidden passages beneath buildings. Some escaped through courthouses connected to both sides of the ghetto wall. Others slipped through sewer routes known only to resistance members. Every escape required perfect timing. One crying child, one suspicious guard, one unexpected inspection could destroy the entire operation. The youngest children presented the greatest challenge. Many were too small to understand why they had to remain silent. To prevent crying during dangerous crossings, rescuers sometimes carried sedatives prescribed by sympathetic doctors. It was an unbearable choice, but a few minutes of silence could mean the difference between life and death. The older children faced a different battle. Before leaving the ghetto, they had to memorize entirely new identities, new names, new birthdays, new religions, new families. Some spent hours practicing Catholic prayers, not because they believed them, but because forgetting a single sentence during a random inspection could expose everything. One frightened child later asked Irena a heartbreaking question. "If I forget my real name, will my mother still know who I am?" Irena smiled. She promised, yes. But inside, she knew memory itself was becoming another victim of the war. As more children escaped, another problem emerged. Many were now living under false identities, scattered across convents, orphanages, farmhouses, private homes. If the war ended, how would anyone know where they were? How would surviving relatives ever find them again? How could a child who had become Anna remember she had once been Rachel? That question haunted Irena every single night. And soon, she would come up with an idea so simple, yet so extraordinary, that decades later, the entire world would remember it. She began writing down every child's true name, their new identity, and the place where they had been hidden. Then, she searched for a place where even the Nazis would never think to look. Every child who escaped carried a new identity, but somewhere, Their real names still existed, hidden on tiny pieces of paper. One by one, Irena carefully wrote them down. The child's real name, their new identity, and the family, convent, or orphanage where they had been hidden. It wasn't just a list. It was the only bridge connecting these children to the lives they had lost. If the war ended, those names might reunite families. If the lists disappeared, thousands of children might never discover who they truly were. The papers grew into a remarkable archive, far too dangerous to keep inside a house, far too valuable to destroy. So Irena made a decision. She folded each list carefully, placed them inside glass jars, sealed them tightly against moisture. Then, under the cover of darkness, she carried them to the garden of a trusted friend. There, beneath an old apple tree, she buried every name. No one looking at that quiet garden could have imagined what lay beneath the soil. Not treasure, not weapons, but the identities of thousands of children. Hope had been buried, so it could survive. For a while, the operation continued. More children escaped. More false identities were created. More names disappeared beneath the apple tree. But every successful rescue increased the danger. The German occupation authorities were no longer dealing with isolated acts of resistance. Someone was systematically helping Jewish children vanish. The Gestapo launched an investigation. Informants were questioned. Safe houses were watched. Couriers disappeared. One mistake, one careless conversation, could expose everyone. Then, in October 1943, it happened. The Gestapo arrested Irena Sendler. She was dragged into prison, interrogated for hours. The Germans knew she belonged to an underground network. What they didn't know was how large that network had become. They demanded names, addresses, meeting places. Where were the children? Who was hiding them? Who forged the documents? Who paid for the operation? Every answer could destroy dozens of lives. Irena said nothing. The interrogations became torture. She was beaten repeatedly. Her legs were broken. Her feet were crushed. The pain was unbearable. Yet every time the questions returned, the answer remained the same: silence. Some historians later wrote that the Gestapo believed no ordinary social worker could possibly endure such punishment without eventually talking. They underestimated one thing: Irena wasn't protecting information. She was protecting children. Every name she refused to reveal meant another child lived one more day. Meanwhile, the underground resistance realized time was running out. If Irena were executed, the rescue network might collapse. Even worse, the buried lists might never be recovered. The Polish resistance made a desperate decision. They bribed one of the German guards responsible for her execution. The plan was unbelievably risky. If discovered, everyone involved would be killed. Money changed hands. Orders were quietly altered. One morning, official records declared that Irena Sendler had been executed, but the woman listed as dead was still alive, bruised, broken, barely able to walk, yet somehow free. From that moment on, she could no longer live under her own name. She disappeared into hiding, a woman officially dead, continuing to save lives in secret. But beneath the apple tree, the jars remained exactly where she had left them, waiting for the day the war would finally end. For nearly 2 years, the glass jars remained buried beneath the apple tree. Above the ground, wars were fought, cities were destroyed, millions of lives were lost. Below the ground, thousands of names waited in silence. Then, in 1945, the war in Europe finally came to an end. Nazi Germany surrendered. The occupation was over. For the first time in years, Irena Sendler could return. She walked back into the same quiet garden where she had once buried hope beneath the soil. No soldiers guarded the streets anymore. No Gestapo searched the houses. Only silence remained. Somewhere beneath the roots of the old apple tree, the jars were still there. Carefully, she began digging. The earth was heavy. Every shovel of soil brought back memories she had tried to forget. The frightened faces, the crying mothers, the children who had disappeared into the night carrying names that were no longer their own. Then, her shovel struck glass. One by one, the jars emerged from the earth, still sealed, still protecting the fragile pieces of paper inside. She opened them carefully. The ink had faded slightly, but the names were still there. Real names, new names, hidden identities, addresses, the map of an entire secret rescue network. For years, those tiny slips of paper had carried the identities of children the Nazis had tried to erase forever. Now, they became the only chance to rebuild lives that had been shattered. Irena immediately passed the lists to Jewish relief organizations and surviving members of the underground network. The search began. Some children were reunited with relatives, aunts, uncles, older brothers or sisters. A few found grandparents who had somehow survived. But for many, the search ended in heartbreak. Entire families had vanished. Parents who had kissed their children goodbye inside the Warsaw Ghetto had been murdered in extermination camps. Many had died in Treblinka, others in Majdanek. Some disappeared without leaving any trace at all. For countless children, there was no one left waiting. The names inside the jars could tell them who they had been, but not everyone could tell them where they belonged anymore. Many children had lived under new identities for years. Some had forgotten their original language. Others no longer remembered the faces of their parents. A few were too young to remember they had ever lived inside the Warsaw Ghetto. The war had stolen more than homes. It had stolen memories. It had stolen childhood. And for many, it had stolen the possibility of ever truly going home again. Years passed, then decades. The world celebrated generals, remembered famous battles, built monuments to victory. Yet the woman who had helped rescue around 2,500 Jewish children remained largely unknown outside Poland. She never described herself as a hero. She never claimed she had changed history. Whenever people praised her courage, she gave almost the same answer: "I could have done more." Those simple words revealed something extraordinary. Even after risking her own life, even after torture, even after helping save thousands of children, she believed she had not done enough. Perhaps that is why her story feels so different. Heroes often speak about what they achieved. Irena spoke about those she could not save. In 1965, Israel recognized her as one of the righteous among the nations, one of the highest honors given to non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jewish people during the Holocaust. Much later, the rest of the world slowly began discovering her story. Books were written, films were made, schools taught children about the woman who buried names beneath an apple tree. But perhaps her greatest memorial isn't a medal, or a statue, or even the countless awards she later received. It is the lives that continued because one woman refused to look away. Children who became parents. Parents who became grandparents. Entire generations who exist today because someone believed a stranger's child was worth risking everything for. History often remembers those who commanded armies or won great battles. But sometimes, the greatest victories leave no battlefield behind. Only lives. Hidden beneath an ordinary tree were thousands of names. But what Irena Sendler truly buried was hope. Hope that one day, when the killing finally stopped, someone would return. dig into the earth, open those jars, and tell every child who they really were. Because the Nazis wanted to erase an entire people from history. Irena Sendler chose to make sure history could remember them. And perhaps that is the greatest act of defiance of all. Some people change history by taking lives. Others change it by saving them. Irena Sendler never carried a rifle. She never commanded an army. She never won a battle. Yet thousands of people lived because of the choices she made. And beneath the roots of one quiet apple tree, history waited until the world was finally ready to hear its story.